Hey, Travis here at Books, Builds, and More, and today I'm doing a review for Book 4 of the Dark Tower series, Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. Interestingly, I don't have a whole lot to say about this book, to be perfectly honest with you, other than the fact that we are now officially halfway through the series, like literally, because I have 4 more books to go after this one. That is counting the Wind Through the Keyhole 4.5, which is more a companion piece than the original 7 full main books. But I'm counting Wind Through the Keyhole because it is part of the canon, part of the main series. So I'm going to say this is book 4 of 8, halfway through the series, like I just said. And it's a huge turning point in the series, but mostly for Roland's character. Yes, indeed, I said it. Roland takes center stage in this book, and for very good reason, because this book is largely over 3/4. I want to say over 3/4 because this is a huge, almost 900-page story. And it consists mostly of a certain time back in Roland's youth after he and his best friends become gunslingers at the age of 14, the ripe old age of 14, and they are sent on a mission of sorts, and all sorts of wacky things happen during this time. But not to go into too many details because it is a pretty grand adventure. Some really interesting stuff happens in this backstory. I really, really did enjoy this backstory. And but I really enjoyed Roland's character. He has officially grown on me. I just found his character to be kind of distasteful since book 1. He's grown a little bit, but this book really puts him like way high at the top of my list. I think the order now goes Roland, Jake, Susanna, Oi, and yes, Eddie is below the Bumbler. Eddie, I'll talk more about these characters in a minute, but right now I just want to focus on Roland's backstory. He had a love interest, a really pretty saucy one at that, and I love this Susan character. I loved that character. If only, and that's all I'm going to say. I really don't want to spoil anything about this book because it was a good book, but there were things I didn't like about it as well. Like, for example, the entire opening, the literal opening chapter of this book was just nothing more than a word-by-word recap of the last chapter of the 3rd book. Like, I thought that was completely unnecessary. Like, you didn't do that in book 2. You didn't do that in book 3. So why do it now? I don't understand that. I mean, I get where the effect, what kind of effect that was going for, a lot of times movies will play that way, or at least they did in the past, where they recap, certain scenes, just to kind of get you up where I just felt like it was unnecessary, for this series. I mean, so much goes on that you just kind of remember what it is, it sticks with you, or it does for me. So I just felt like that entire word-by-word recap was just completely, it just wasn't necessary. It just wasn't needed. Also, I'm very torn over that whole Wizard of Oz thing at the end. At first, I thought it was just flat out a mockery. It was just a flat out mockery. That's what it felt like at first. But the more I read, and especially when the true purpose of that was eventually revealed, as this part of the story. Also, rewinding back to the fact that there were blatant references to The Stand in this book, which I really enjoyed. It brought me back to that. I think I'm starting to appreciate it a little bit more because I'm trying to figure out how this world works. I think, and the one thing that I'm trying to hold on to is one thing that has been said a few times throughout this series so far, is the fact that the doors in this world open to many others. And there's a reason for these thinnies, these things. They're like portals, but they're like almost kind of sentient, but they're very dangerous, It's like they represent reality bleeding or falling apart, because apparently the Dark Tower is some sort of source for everything. I'm not quite clear what its significance is yet, but I think we're getting closer clues thanks to this book. A lot of stuff is really starting to come to light a little bit, not flat out explained quite yet, of course, because we still have 3, 4 technically more books left in the series to get all of this wrapped up, hopefully. And I'm trying to keep in mind that so much stuff, and also there were some things that happened when they landed in Topeka in the beginning of this book and started seeing, like, this is where the references to the Stand really come to play, but there are also things going on that don't match. I don't know, it's hard to explain. It really is like the whole thing about, like, the Kansas Monarchs. It's not the same thing. What was the other team? I've already forgot the other team, but that's not Kansas, not related to Kansas. But there's something different there. So I'm trying to figure out how this world is working. And I think it's because all the worlds are starting to bleed. All the realities that are possibly out there are starting to bleed, and they're kind of overlapping each other. And I think that's the way this world is working. And because I think, now I could be wrong about this, but like the timeline of where they're at in the Topeka in this book doesn't match everything that's happened in the Stand. But I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on that. But this ultimately is what I'm trying to say, which brings me back to the whole Wizard of Oz thing in there. Because The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum is an actual story. It was written, in the late 19th century, and the story has, withstood the test of time. It's just timeless. It's a timeless classic, and it's spawned countless entries, there afterward. This isn't an Oz entry, by the way, of course, obviously, but I'm just saying that of any story in there, it also kind of made sense because it fit the format of this quartet that Roland. There are 4 of them with a Billy Bumbler, 4 beings with a pet on their way to see the wizard or the Dark Tower. It is Wizard of Oz-ish, you could think of it that way, but that's all I'm going to say about it. I thought it was to think about it more and to kind of mull over it a little bit more and think about it in that way. I'm trying to hold on to the fact that instead of looking at it as mocking the Wizard of Oz, I need to incorporate what I think is the true meaning of how this world is working. Okay, so the Roland's entire backstory was just phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. It was just a great way to really, truly introduce his character. Yes, I'm going to say it. After 3 books of Roland Deschain, I think this was his official introduction, or at least that's the way it felt to me, because it takes him back to right after he becomes a gunslinger. He and his 2 best friends, and who are all 3 gunslingers, and they, kind of go on this mission, and they just it's just, I can't spoil anything, but let's just say they meet up with a gang of enemies. I'm just going to leave it at that. Enemies called Big Coffin Hunters. And as bad as they were, I got to say they were some interesting characters, particularly Eldred Jonas. He was just a mean son of a gun. But let me tell you something. I felt like he was just one of the most interesting characters because he was a failed gunslinger. I will spoil that. I will say that. And I don't think it will harm anything by doing that, because it was important, I think, to have something like that, especially toward Roland, because he was a failed gunslinger, and Roland and his pals are basically green, freshly new gunslingers. They share that same mindset. One has been corrupted, one is fresh, and now it becomes this kind of battle of wits, along the same lines of gunslinger thinking, and it paid off. I think it paid off really well, and they played well against each other with that. As brief as they were in meeting, the impact was very profound. Yeah, I thought Jonas was a really interesting character. Again, mean and vicious and just nasty as he was. I thought he was a great character. I really did. I have to. That's just how I felt. Susan was by far one of the standout characters in this book. She was obviously important to Roland because she was the love of his life, but she was just a feisty character. She was just such an incredibly well-rounded and just well flashed out character. I think she was just great. I loved Susan. I just I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say I just wish and leave it at that. Oh yeah, I want to just spew so much about this book, but I can't because I don't want to spoil it. But it's not too high of a ranking book for me because I gave it 4 stars. I'm giving it 4 stars. It wasn't a bad book. I still think the first book, though, is the best book in the series, although a lot of people say that this one is their favorite book and is the best book in the series. I'm going to have to hold off judgment for that. Well, no, not really, because I just said The Gunslinger. I still think the first book is the best one in the series thus far. So yeah, I think looking at it in that respect, everything I just said, this is kind of a balanced book in a way. It was just a simple mixture of good versus bad, what I liked, what I disliked. But ultimately, I liked it more than I disliked it. There were far more things likable than there were to dislike. Like I said, I want to talk about the characters for a minute, though, and go back to that. Roland, I really understand Roland now. This was the turning point in the series for me where his character really stood out and came to the forefront. We saw a lot of vulnerability in Roland in this book, particularly toward the end when he's just completely broken after everything that's happened. And now he has to reform. But after hearing this tale, and this goes into his now current quartet of Jake, Eddie, and Susanna, I appreciate those characters. Yes, even Eddie, slightly him. I think Eddie is starting to become a little bit more mature. He's still annoying with the clowning around and the joking and the crap that he's just pulling. It gets a little old, and I think it's just done. It feels like it's just being done just to be done now at this point. And I'm just sitting here thinking, let the dude grow up a little bit. He's got he could have this other great personality. I mean, he's getting over heroin withdrawal. He's married to Susanna, and I don't want to spoil it. Let's just leave it at that. Something else, that may happen in the future with this relationship of Susanna and him. And speaking of Susanna, I want to see more Detta. I'm sorry, I know she's a wild character. I want to see more Detta. And I know that book 6 is called Song of Susanna. So I'm guessing that a lot of that book is going to focus maybe on a lot of more of her backstory, or maybe just a simple twist in her character later in the series, like between now and that book. I don't know, but I don't know. I just still like her. There's just something about Susanna that's just always grabbed me. Not just the Detta thing, but I just feel like she's one of those that has, her character has so much potential that there's something beneath just bursting to come out. More than just the Detta thing. It's just something else. I can't put my finger on it. And then again, that might not be the case. It's just a feeling I've got right now because that's why I like her character, is the mystique. I think there's more to her character than meets the eye. As for Jake, Jake's just cool. He's just that cool kid. You can't wait to see him grow up, be a better gunslinger, and see what kind of mess he gets himself into, in the later. He's just a cool kid, and you can tell because he idolizes Roland, obviously. He wants to be a part of this quartet. This is his family, He doesn't have the best home life, or had the best home life during his win back in New York. And, it's just nice to see him kind of idolize Roland, kind of look up to him. He kind of is close, he's kind of this adopted kid, sort of, or feels that way. He's more like, he sees Eddie as more like a big brother type, I guess, and Susanna this motherly figure to him. And of course he's got Oi, his pet Billy Bumbler, Oi, who is, you know, a really cool character himself. I think Oi's a lot smarter than we think he is. I don't know. I think we're going to get more Oi in the future. And while we're on the subject of characters, there were a ton of secondary characters, of course, during this whole backstory throughout the majority of this book. Now, one thing I kind of frowned on was some of the bumbling, clownish, at least that's the way it kind of come off, on the bad side. On some of the bad characters were just kind of, you know, kind of painted like, to me, some of them, some of the antics kind of came off on the level of like Don Knotts and Tim Conway's characters in the Apple Dumpling Gang, you know, just kind of borderline slapstick, but not really. They were just, no, not even that. But just not threatening. It's on a level that's not, it took the tension and the threat away. The intimidation was just kind of gone, you know. I don't know. I just didn't really care for it a whole lot. It's, you want your bad guys to be bad, make them bad, you know. Don't just, you know, give them. I mean, I understand that you want some comic relief here and there, and you know, the bad guys don't need to be painted as dolts. You know, you can have very, very smart villains. Um, you know, look at Pennywise. Look at well, Randall Flagg. And speaking of Randall Flagg, yes, sir, he does make an appearance here. Yes, I am going to spoil this, but I think anybody who knows the series will tell you, you know, you already know this. So, yeah, but what I really like the most about Randall Flagg in this story is that Jake, Susanna, and Eddie get their kind of like first initial taste of what he's like. And I was really, that was something I've always anticipated, is wanting them to meet the man behind the personality. Randall Flagg, I'm just going to put it out there, is probably my favorite Stephen King villain. Sorry, Pennywise. Sorry, Jack. Sorry, Annie Wilkes. You know, sorry, any Cujo, any of the other, well, Cujo technically isn't a villain. He was a poor victim of circumstance. Poor Pooch, but, you know, whatever. Uh, mm, Randall Flagg, yeah, probably one of my, just his personality. I mean, he can be so funny, and he's just so calm and collected about it, but so evil at the same time. But yet he's still vulnerable. He has weaknesses. So he's a flawed villain, which is very interesting to me. But his personality, I just want to see his personality, you know, interact with these other characters, because that's the kind of characteristic I like in a villain, is just they have a little bit of playfulness to them, but they're very serious about it at the same time. They're very deadly with it, and but just calm and cool and collected. It's how they manipulate, it's how they entice. So yeah, I think he's got all the great traits that make a really good villain. As far as the pacing goes, it's a pretty fast-paced book. Once you get to turning these pages, yeah, you really start to fly through, especially, well, there were a few sections that may have been a little bit of a slow burn here and there throughout the backstory. But yeah, I think it's a fairly fast-paced read, you know, once you really get going, especially toward the end, and everything just starts to happen, one thing right after another. It builds and builds until it, you know, it really it hits the spot. And yeah, that's my take on Wizard and Glass, book 4 of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. So far, it's not been a bad road. It's not been a bad series at all. But now, at this point of my way of reading it as an extended read, it's time to take a break from the main series and start reading some of these adjacent books in the order that I had originally set up. And my next one on my agenda is Skeleton Crew. Specifically the short story, or the novella, basically. It's like 150 some pages. The Mist, which is supposed to have some type of reference or relation to the Dark Tower series. And then after that, I'm supposed to read it, or at least that's the way it became on the order. But since I've read it twice, obviously I'm going to be skipping it. And I'm going to be going into From a Buick 8, which falls on a lot of people's adjacent Dark Tower reading lists. Not sure how to feel. A lot of people pan this book, so I'm not really sure how I'm going to feel about it. As of right now, that's my plan. And then after that, I'm gonna have some more adjacent books before I get back into the main series. So that's where I stand right now. So if you've stuck with me this long, not only for this video, but for my Dark Tower reading journey thus far, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for watching. And until the next video, have a great day.